Hi, Stories Channel here.
Today we're going to take a look at the third sequence of the horror film series, Hostel 3. The movie begins as a young man named Travis goes into a hotel room. Inside, a Ukrainian couple, Victor and Anka, are currently staying. Victor offers him vodka but Travis states that he brought beer for them. They take sips from the bottle and Anka walks away into the shower. Suddenly, she drops unconscious and gradually Victor goes down as well after being drugged by the beer Travis gave them. As Travis sits on a chair beside their immobile bodies, two men come into the house and wrap them in the body bags to be taken away. It is then revealed that Travis is a member of the elite hunting club. Up next, we see a couple outside their house. The guy named Scott is leaving his fiancée Amy to go to Las Vegas with his friend Carter for a bachelor party. On their way, Carter reveals that he has something else in his mind. As they enter the illustrious city of Las Vegas, the scene shifts to a dark cage where Victor wakes up and watches in sheer helplessness as two men drag Anka out of her cage. Meanwhile, the boys meet up with their other friends, Mike and Justin. The four of them then go to a nightclub, where they gamble on and enjoy themselves. After a while, they meet Kendra and Nikki, two escorts, which Carter secretly paid to have sex with Scott. Kendra and Nikki tell the four men about a freaky party they could go to on the other end of town. Therefore, they take a cab to an abandoned building. They enter inside and come across a dark and dingy hall. As the other guys move ahead, Scott gives a call to Amy. He tells her that he's into something right now and will call her later. Afterwards, he looks around and finds nobody there. Sensing the suspicion, he starts walking ahead when someone straps him to a wheelchair and drags him away. With a flash, Scott opens his eyes to find himself at the bachelor party with a stripper on top of him. The guys are cheering at him and the party goes on. At the bar, Justin is sitting and Nikki comes beside him. She offers him a card and walks away with Mike. Meanwhile, Kendra is with Scott. She makes a move on him in order to get close, but he declines and tells her about how he previously cheated on Amy and almost lost her. He does not want it to happen again. Kendra gets back and just then, Nikki and Mike intervene. As they all sit together, Scott feels nauseated so he walks out. Due to the excessive drinking, he throws up in the bin and knocks himself out at the door. The following morning, Scott wakes up in his hotel room with Carter and Justin. As they discuss, the three wonder where Mike is, as he is not answering his phone. Meanwhile, we see that Mike wakes in the cell and starts panicking. He stands up to see Victor in the cage across from him and talking about dying. As Mike is trying to decipher everything, two guards take him out and strap him to a chair in an empty room. With one wall made of glass, Mike is on display to be gambled upon by wealthy clients. A middle-aged client dressed as a doctor enters the room and begins the torture, while the other rich clients watch in amusement. The doctor threatens him with a drill while Mike pleads with him to spare him. The man doesn't listen and then marks a line on his face. Afterwards, he brutally cuts and peels Mike's face off while he screams in pure agony. In the interim, the guys become concerned about Mike but Carter states that he will be alright. Nevertheless, Scott stays adamant about finding him. Therefore, they all fish out Nikki's address and travel to a trailer park. They locate Nikki's trailer and Scott breaks in through the window. Carter follows his lead while Justin stays behind. As they enter it, the whole trailer seems to be empty. Just then, Kendra bursts in through the door with another man and pulls guns on the three of them. Scott apologizes for the break-in and states their purpose of visit. Upon hearing their explanation, Kendra then reveals that Nikki is missing as well. Meanwhile, Travis can be seen going through a series of dresses. He picks up a college uniform and takes it to Nikki who is strapped down. After dressing her up, she is brought into the same room as Mike and strapped to a table. Another man who speaks in Hungarian enters the room and releases a jar full of cockroaches onto Nikki. The insects crawl into her mouth and suffocate her to death. During this murderous process, all the clients watch in pleasure and cheer on. On the other hand, the guys and Kendra drive back and decide to retrace Nikki's steps from the club. As they return to the empty street, Justin gets a text from Mike's phone, sent by Travis, to meet him and Nikki in the hostel. Upon getting the address of Fremont District, they arrive in the street. Everyone gets out except Justin, who stays back due to his leg problem. The rest of them move ahead and go to Mike's room where they find Nikki's purse. Suddenly, Travis enters the room and kidnaps them all. Meanwhile, Justin notices the men putting up bodies in the car and decides to check on them. In a flash, Travis springs up in front of him and after an argument, they get in a fight. Travis eventually overcomes Justin and throws him in the van as well. All of them later wake up in the individual cells along with Victor. The two guards arrive in the room and take Justin away. Meanwhile, Carter calls the guard and informs them that he is also a client. After he shows his elite hunting club tattoo, the guard lets him go. Scott watches in utmost bewilderment as Carter safely gets out of the cage. Carter is then seated in a lavish room where he meets the head of the hunting club, named Fleming. After a brief conversation, he makes a deal with Fleming and agrees on giving up his own friends for the hunt. After the decision is made, Carter turns around and witnesses Justin being strapped to the chair. Smoke starts filling the room and a costumed woman enters the scene. While the clients cheer, the woman shoots Justin with multiple crossbow bolts. Eventually, he dies in the chair in silence. Up next, we see Travis entering the room and asking Carter to be ready for the showtime. Meanwhile, Victor is still in his cell, deciding to become the offender. He talks with Scott while Kendra also wakes up. Just then, the guards arrive there and drag Scott out of his cell. He's taken to the dressing room where they force him to wear a white tuxedo suit. The main event now starts and Scott is strapped into the chair. Carter then enters the room. Scott asks Carter why he is doing this, and Carter reveals he wants Amy for himself, as they were in a relationship before she ended up with Scott. Furthermore, Carter states that he was disappointed that Amy stayed with Scott, even after he told her about Scott's infidelity. With that, he enrages his own friend by telling him that once Scott dies, he will comfort Amy and she will want to be with him. He then picks up a chainsaw and decides to bring up a show. During all this time, Fleming is watching and he suddenly orders Scott to be let go from the chair. As soon as the metal flaps open, Scott and Carter indulge in a brutal fight. The crowd starts cheering at the twist and enjoys the show. The brawl goes sideways and Scott ends up stabbing Carter. As the clients beam in joy, Scott cuts off Carter's skin, and then escapes by using his tattoo on the scanners. Back at the holding cells, Victor kills one of the guards with the electric taser and frees himself. He runs away for his life and dashes through the corridors. In the interim, Scott also escapes into the corridors. Fleming gets the news about the escaped prisoners and orders the security to round them up. Intermediately, Scott arrives in the storage area and fondles through the stuff to locate his cell phone. Meanwhile, Victor is killed by another guard after a face-to-face vicious encounter. In the interim, Scott calls the cops and runs away to free Kendra. They successfully make it out of the holding, but Kendra is shot dead by Travis. In the meantime, Fleming orders all of the prisoners to be killed. He sets up a detonation timer for the building and then runs away to his car in order to escape. Much to his bad luck, he gets stabbed to death in his own car by Carter. On the other side, Scott runs away and enters the incinerator area where he comes across Justin and Mike's dead bodies. Travis arrives there behind him and they both burst into a fight. Scott manages to kill Travis after chopping his arm off. Outside, Carter drives away in the Cadillac and uses Fleming's body to get over the spikes. After he drives into the open, he sees Scott running for his own life. Carter drives out of the building compound and locks the front gate before Scott can get to him. As Scott screams after him, Carter quickly drives off on the road. Scott tries to climb the fence but suddenly the whole building explodes behind him and from a distance, we see the whole place burning up in flames. Sometime later, Carter is comforting Amy in her house. They both watch Scott's urn placed on the cabinet. Amy becomes weak with grief and leans onto Carter. He consoles her and comforts her while feeling accomplished. Amy then states that he should stay the night. As he sits proudly on the table, Amy reveals that Scott is still alive and pins Carter's hand to a chair with a corkscrew. We then witness that Scott appears behind him, with a burned head. Both of them strap Carter on a chair. As he whimpers in helplessness, Scott walks through a number of lethal tools. He decides to use a lightweight gas-powered tiller and ultimately kills Carter with it. As his agonizing screams ring through the house, the movie comes to an end. Thanks for watching, guys.